Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I am audible to you. Okay, we are about to begin with the webinar with Tilawat al-Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء في الميزان صدق الله العظيم.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all on behalf of the team of Strategic Vision Institute to our insightful webinar on Pakistan's Kashmir policy amidst a shifting landscape. Today, we aim to gain profound insights into the contemporary challenges surrounding Pakistan's Kashmir policy as the event brings together distinguished experts to delve into the crucial aspects of Pakistan's approach towards Kashmir. Let's begin the event by introducing our esteemed speakers. The introductory remarks for today's session will be delivered by Dr. Naeem Salik. Dr. Salik is currently the Executive Director at Strategic Vision Institute, Islamabad. He has been a visiting scholar at the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University and a guest scholar at the Brookings Institution, Washington, besides being a visiting fellow at the Stanford University and Stimson Center. He holds a Master's in History from the Punjab University, a BSc Honours in War Studies from Balochistan University, an MSc in Strategic Studies from the University of Wales, UK, and a PhD from the University of Western Australia. His areas of expertise include South Asian security, with specific reference to Indian and Pakistani policies on nuclear and missile issues. He has published 4 books, including 2 edited volumes, several monographs, and contributed 7 book chapters. His published work also includes over 40 research articles. Our first speaker for today is Mr. Oves Anwar. Mr. Oves Anwar is the Director of Research at the Research Society of International Law. He is currently affiliated as a Senior Fellow at the Center of Excellence for International Law at the National Defense University, Islamabad. He contributes to shape Pakistan's international investment regime reforms as a member of Prime Minister's Working Group of Experts. As an expert of the field, he has been a much sought-after speaker at institutions such as the National Defense University, Pakistan's Foreign Services Academy, Pakistan Naval War College, and judicial academies across different provinces. Mr. Anwar, with a diverse legal background, has authored significant publications, including publications on counterterrorism, criminal investigation, cyber surveillance, and legislative reforms. Holding an LLB honours from the University of London, an LLM with a distinction from the School of Oriental and African Studies, an LLM in the International Legal Studies from the University of Vienna, and a Diploma University in International Nuclear Law from the University of Montpellier. Mr. Anwar's academic achievements complement his impactful contribution to legal scholarship and practice in Pakistan. Our second speaker, who will shortly be joining us, is Dr. Asma Shakir Khawaja. Dr. Asma Shakir Khawaja is the Executive Director of the Center of International Strategic Studies, Azad Jammu and Kashmir. She brings over 2 decades of expertise in strategic studies and peace building. As a former head of the National Defense University Department of Strategic Studies and the founder of its Peace and Conflict Studies Department. Her dedication to the peace building is further demonstrated by her participation in prestigious programs like the Crisis Management Course, the IVLP Fellowship, the Rotary Peace Fellowship, and the ICRC Fellowship. Her research spans geopolitics, energy security, gender studies, and peace and security. I'm confident that her insights on the complexities of Pakistan's Kashmir policy will offer us a deeper understanding of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead of us. We are delighted to have such distinguished experts with us today, whose voices carry deep weight in the field. Without further ado, I would like to request Dr. Naeem Salik to deliver the introductory remarks for the session.
Thank you, Aisha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and good morning to everybody. I would like to welcome our distinguished guests for today's event and thank them for finding time to be with us for this event. I am sure we are going to benefit greatly from their expertise and their views. I would just like to briefly set the stage for the further discussion on the issue. And obviously, I won't be going into details because I don't want to preempt these worthy speakers. It's very important that we try to remind ourselves of the significance of the Kashmir issue and celebrate that day, Kashmir Day, every year. But my feeling is that this has become a kind of a routine activity which we carry out in the first week of February every year and then forget about it for the rest of the year. Particularly in terms of research and writing on the various aspects of Kashmir issue. If you look at the publications which have been produced by Western writers, as well as some of the Indian scholars, particularly people like Mr. Nurani and others, I find that there's a lot to be done by the Pakistani scholars. It's a pity that we keep talking about the UN resolutions on Kashmir and want the Kashmir dispute to be resolved according to the terms of those resolutions. But unfortunately, most of us haven't even bothered to read the text of those resolutions. And it sometimes becomes very embarrassing at particularly at multinational and international forums. It happened a few years back in Washington once a youngster was very emotionally trying to argue in favor of the implementation of the UN resolutions. And once he was asked by one of the panelists there that have you read the text of the resolutions, and he had to cut a very sorry figure. So that should not be the case. I think whichever our area of specialization or interest, as educated Pakistanis, it is incumbent upon us to at least be familiar with the basic facts of the dispute and the documents like the terms and conditions which are there in the accession document, the chronology of the events, and also the UN resolutions, and later on all the arbitration mechanisms and the representatives which were appointed by the United Nations to resolve this dispute. Not many people have read the text by Mr. Owen Dixon, who was an Australian jurist. Similarly, Mr. Joseph Corbell, who was also at one time the UN Special Representative for Kashmir, he has written a book and also a small monograph, which are very insightful, but unfortunately, these are not easily available on our bookstores or libraries, and not many of us have read that. So with that preamble, at the time of partition, as we know, the partition formula was on the basis of the subcontinent was partitioned on the basis of the Muslim majority areas and the Hindu majority areas. According to that principle, Punjab, Bengal, and Assam, which were in all Muslim majority areas, should have come to Pakistan. And just have a look at the map, and you will realize that if whole of Punjab, whole of Bengal, and Assam had come to Pakistan, our comparison vis-a-vis India in terms of size and resources would have been very different from what we have now. So that was one issue, because then Nehru was able to convince Mountbatten that if the subcontinent can be divided, why can't Punjab and Bengal be divided? Because he said that there are certain areas in these provinces, and these were, by the way, two of the largest and most populous provinces, and that there are certain areas in these provinces which are which have Hindu majority or non-Muslim majority, so they should not go against their desire to Pakistan, and he was able to get the Punjab and Bengal divided, and with that went Assam to India. As far as the scheme of things is concerned, I think it was the problem of Kashmir was pre-planned. It did not just emerge. India had designs on Kashmir, and the British, particularly the Viceroy, last Viceroy Mountbatten, who incidentally became the first Governor General of India after partition, was party to it. And he was able to convince Sir Cyril Ratcliffe, who was responsible for drawing the boundary between India and West Pakistan and India and East Pakistan, was persuaded by Mountbatten to give two districts of Gurdaspur to India, because without that India would not have had a land access to Kashmir. And because of those areas, Gurdaspur district was overall a Muslim majority area. And once that area was given to India, it not only provided land access to India, but opened the way for future Indian intervention in Kashmir. And until the night of 15th of August, the people in Gurdaspur were very confident that they are going to be part of Pakistan, and they were flying Pakistani flags on their houses. And suddenly at midnight, they learned that their area has been, their homeland has been given to India, and which also resulted in a lot of disruption, a lot of bloodshed of the Muslims, because they had to hurriedly migrate from there to Pakistan. So the seeds of the Kashmir problem were sown there at the time of the drawing of the boundary by giving the Gurdaspur district to India. Now there were there were over 500 princely states in British India, and according to the independence scheme, these princely states were given the choice of either joining either of the two dominions, India or Pakistan, or they could also choose to remain independent. But since their geographical location was such that they were surrounded by these two countries on all sides, and they could not exist independently without their agreement, so most of them, they decided to accede to either India or Pakistan. However, there were three states which kept their options open. I think there were two reasons for that. First was that the rulers of these states, they wanted to improve their bargaining position. They just did not want to accede to any of the two states. They wanted to bargain and get a favorable bargain from them, including internal autonomy. And they also, to some extent, harbored the intentions of remaining independent themselves. So these three states were Junagadh, which is located somewhere halfway between Karachi and Bombay. It has a coastline, but on other three sides it is surrounded by the Indian territory. It was the smallest of these three states, with a Muslim Nawab ruling it and majority of the population being Hindus. The second was Hyderabad, which had been ruled by the Muslims for a long time, the Nizam of Hyderabad. It was a very rich, resourceful state, and this had no connection, land connection with Pakistan. Neither it had a coastline, so this was a state which was surrounded on all sides by the Indian territory. Again, here the ruler was Muslim, but the majority of the population was Hindu. The third state was Kashmir, where, contrary to these two states, the ruler was Hindu Maharaja, whereas the bulk of the majority, or very large majority, or about 80% of the population was Muslim. There is also historical evidence to suggest that their social, cultural, and even economic linkages were with the area that constituted Pakistan. All the road access to Kashmir was through Pakistani territory. And all the trade was between the Kashmir and with the areas which constituted Pakistan now. And there was a historical linkage, and then plus the majority Muslim population. But as I said, there were already designs to give Kashmir to India by giving them land access. And according to that, the Maharaja, he was known to be a very tyrant ruler, and he came down with a very heavy hand on the Muslims, and he arrested most of the prominent Muslim leaders, Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas, Mirwais Yusuf, and others. And there was an uprising in the Punch area, which was again suppressed with force. But as some of you would know already, the Punch district of Kashmir was a very peculiar area, because there were over 100,000 people from this district alone which had participated in the Second World War as part of the British Indian Army. And most of them were demobilized after the partition, and so those retired, trained military soldiers, they were living in that district. And they took up arms and they rose against the Maharaja. And then there were also news of the atrocities against Muslims in Jammu and Kashmir, and because of that, it stirred up emotions in the tribal areas of Pakistan. And some of the political leaders of that area, particularly Khan Abdul Qayyum Khan, who was the chief minister of the then Northwest Frontier Province, he organized the tribal lashkars and provided them transport and logistics, facilitated their move towards Kashmir, and they moved into Kashmir to support the Muslims of Punch district and other areas in their struggle against the Maharaja. And that is how then they started moving in. There's a lot of evidence to suggest, contrary to the accusations by the Indians, that that Pakistani state itself was not officially involved in this intervention in Kashmir. In fact, there are some studies which suggest that even Quaid-e-Azam was not informed of this tribal lashkars intervening in Kashmir until after 1 month of this intervention had started. Mr. Liaquat Ali Khan, the Prime Minister, knew about it, and some of the other political leaders. but it was all being done secretly. These were all veterans, war veterans, retired veterans, and just a handful of army officers who were coordinating the effort. But as such, no military unit was involved. The situation at that time was that the British officers were still there, from unit commander level to the general officers and the army chief. They were all British. And the government did not want them to know about it. And so all these things were done very secretively. Once Jinnah came to know about it at the end of October, particularly after the Indian military intervention on 27th of October. That is also a very interesting aspect, because the Maharaja requested for help from the Indians, and Mountbatten told the Indian government that you should only send military assistance to Maharaja once he has signed the instrument of accession to India. And that document was drafted by Mr. Krishna Menon, and then it was taken to Jammu, where purportedly Maharaja signed it on 26th or 27th of October. And 27th October, the Indian forces started landing at Srinagar. Now, all those who know that how much preparation and planning goes into launching such kind of an operation, it is impossible that within 24 hours of the signing of the instrument of accession, the Indian forces could be airlifted and dropped at Srinagar. It shows very clearly that the planning was there, the forces were already earmarked and ready, and the transportation, everything was coordinated. And that is why the moment they were prepared, they were flown to Srinagar and landed there. This document itself is very controversial, because a lot of people believe that actually this was signed ex post facto. The Indian forces had landed already, and it was signed by the Maharaja at a later date, but on the document itself it shows 26th October. And then, as we all know, how the things went, and in January 48, India took the issue to the Security Council, and the later history, I'm sure the speakers will throw much light on that. So I just wanted to give you, because this background of these states. Once the problem started in Junagadh, India took a public stand that in such kind of disputes, the dispute should be resolved through a referendum, where people's wishes could be ascertained. While they were asking for referendum, they had also started occupying the peripheral areas of Junagadh state, and they had also caused an internal insurrection and established a provisional government which was already attacking Junagadh state. And then finally the Indian army moved in and occupied Junagadh state, and they call this incidentally a police action, although the army was involved. Once they said this, Liaquat Ali sent a telegram to Nehru, and he said, yes, we agree to discuss with you this principle of referendum to determine people's wishes, but you should remember, and I am sure you realize, that this is not the only state which is at issue. There are other states also where this referendum principle needs to be applied, and he meant by that Hyderabad and Kashmir, particularly Kashmir. And you would also be surprised that Hyderabad remained indecisive until September 1948. And the day after Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah's death on 11th of September, on 12th of September 1948, Indian forces moved into Hyderabad and occupied it, finding it an opportune moment once Pakistanis were grieving the loss of their founding father. The Indians exploited that opportunity to move forces into Hyderabad. And Kashmir story you are going to listen now from the other speakers also. In November 47, incidentally, after this proposals for referendum, Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah actually suggested that why get into these formalities of referendum and plebiscite and all these things. It is very clear that these are Hindu majority states ruled by the Muslim rulers, and Kashmir is a Muslim majority state ruled by Hindu Raja. So let's carry out a barter, clean barter. You give Kashmir to us and you can take Hyderabad and Junagadh. But that was not accepted, and then obviously later on what all has happened. In recent times, as we all know, on 5th of August 2019, the Indian state took a unilateral action to change the status of Kashmir and taking away its special status which had been granted to the state of Jammu and Kashmir by the Indian Constitution. And it has created further complications. And we should also remember that after the nuclearization of South Asia, the options to resolve this issue through military use of military instruments have been curtailed. They have been limited because of the fear of a nuclear escalation. So the only option available is through the diplomatic negotiations to resolve this dispute. There have been other lot of proposals like the plebiscite in the whole of the state, and then partial plebiscite. There have been proposals about freezing the status quo. The territories which are currently under the control of Pakistan should remain with Pakistan, and territories under the control of India should remain with India. Another proposal was that there should be no referendum in the territories which are under control of India and Pakistan. The referendum should only be carried out in the valley of Kashmir. And there have been other things also. There have been issues about the status of Gilgit-Baltistan. Historically, Gilgit-Baltistan was never part of Kashmir. It was an independent territory which was at some stage occupied by the Maharaja of Kashmir, militarily occupied. And then once the British took over, they got this area on a 100-year lease from the Maharaja. But that lease ended with the end of the British rule in 47. And frustrated by the high-handedness of the Maharaja, the people of Gilgit and Baltistan, they rose against the Maharaja at their own independently, and there were these Gilgit scouts who removed the governor who was appointed by the Maharaja of Kashmir on 30th of October and took control of the territory of Gilgit-Baltistan. And later on, they requested Pakistan to send its administrative machinery and its forces, security forces, to secure the area. So, should it have been dealt with separately, or should it be considered as part of the overall Kashmir conflict? That is another issue which we need to ponder about and think of its future, because there is a demand by the people there that they want a status of a full-fledged province of Pakistan, like other provinces. Although they have been given their own parliament, they select their own representatives, but they do not have the status of the main Pakistani provinces. So that is another issue on which we need to not only carry out historical research to find the origins of Gilgit-Baltistan and how it became part of Kashmir and how it detached itself, and also think about its future. So I think I have already spoken a lot. I end here, and Aisha, you can proceed further.
Thank you so much, sir. With the remarks of Sir Salik, we will move ahead, and I would request Dr. Oves to present his perspective on the legal aspect and international implication for Pakistan regarding the Kashmir cause. Over to you, sir.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Aisha, thank you very much. Dr. Naeem, Salik, Dr. Asma, Khawaja, respected guests, viewers. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank Aisha for promoting me to a doctor. I sadly do not have a doctorate, but perhaps in the near future. But in any case, the issue of Kashmir that we see before us right now, I think this conference or this discussion is very rightly, very aptly named and focuses on the changing landscape. I think over the past decade or so, we've seen such immense changes taking place. Whether it is to Pakistan's position, whether it is to India's recognition of India's ascendancy, whether it is our economy or changing global alliances. So much has happened that I think it is fundamental for us to take that into account and then revisit our assumptions, our ideas about the Kashmir dispute. I think one thing that we recognize, especially from the past few years, especially from India's abrogation of Article 370, and perhaps most importantly, the Indian Supreme Court judgment on this abrogation, is that life isn't fair, and that you can be a country that abides by the rules and follows every precept of international law, and yet still be penalized or bullied by states that do not abide by the principles of international law. And I think that is something, the realpolitik of it, the reality of it, really, we have to keep in mind. We have to understand that what India has done with regards to, say, abrogation of Article 370 is categorically unfair, illegal from an international law point of view. And I'll go into that in some detail. Just for the knowledge of our viewers, and I'm sure they already know this, Article 370 is, as Dr. Salik very rightly mentioned, was the special status. Article 370 and 35A of the Indian Constitution gave special status to Kashmir, and that prevented certain aspects of general Indians to be able to, say, purchase property in Kashmir, or be able to gain Kashmiri domicile, or become a Kashmiri as such. Now, all of those issues, if we keep in mind, they have been taken away by this abrogation. And for Pakistan, it's frankly irrelevant what India does. But for the Indians, this fiction that they had created, and this fiction went back to the 1950s, whereby the Constituent Assembly, basically gave all of Kashmir to India. This fiction that they've created, the abrogation of Article 370 is simply an escalation of that original sin or that original fiction. And what we see there is something that is, something that does not abide in any way by this UN Security Council resolutions, which the UN Security Council resolutions, in fact, categorically stated that this fiction cannot survive, that India cannot simply assume sovereign title over the territory of Kashmir by this concocted body of the Constituent Assembly in Jammu and Kashmir and assume title and all the rights and privileges that emanate from that. So what we clearly see in this situation is that the Indian Supreme Court judgment has simply been another continuation of that original fiction, where they've said that all of this territory, and very eloquently, I might add, they've added these things, but they have fundamentally forgotten or deliberately, and of course it's deliberate, chosen to omit any reference to any international law and omit any reference to the UN Security Council resolutions, miraculously as if they don't even exist or they've never existed. And that is, when you're looking at the highest legal body, the highest judicial body of a country, and a country of 1.4 billion people, it's almost farcical. So what we look at here is that even though Article 370 was irrelevant for Pakistan, the fact that it was able to maintain for this long the demographics of Jammu and Kashmir still gave rise to this hope that perhaps at some point in the future there would be a resolution in accordance with the principles established by the UN Security Council resolutions, where a plebiscite and resort to the will of the people, an exercise of self-determination would take place. Now this is gone. We see immense demographic change taking place in the bifurcated Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh areas now, and this is fatal almost to the cause and the position that was established and stood the test of time for 70 odd plus years, which was demanded by the UN Security Council resolutions. Now, if we do not have Kashmiris who vote in any plebiscite, there is no point of a plebiscite, right? If you have Indian citizens from all over India coming in, becoming Kashmiris, and part of that. So the demographic change, the only reason why Article 370 mattered to us was because it maintained the demographics of Kashmir and this idea of vote. But I think now that we are in this position, we understand that something unfair and unlawful has taken place against the Kashmiri people, the people of Gilgit-Baltistan, and of course the people of Pakistan as well, because we are so uniquely intertwined with the fate of Jammu and Kashmir. I think we need to revisit our assumptions and our ideas about Kashmir as well. When it comes to, say, a resolution on Kashmir, we need to be very realistic now. We are the smaller power in this relationship. We are no more the parity between our two military forces or our economic might or anything, literally any parameter that you judge this by. That parity is the gulf is increasing. India is taking, going ahead. This year there'll be their economy grows at 6.5% predicted. Ours has been downgraded to less than 2%. We are going through economic troubles. We will continue to go through these troubles for the foreseeable future. These are things that we need to keep in mind now. Right? India is vying very strongly for a permanent UN Security Council seat. And frankly speaking, if we dispassionately look at the situation, they might even deserve it. They're the most populous country in the world. Why shouldn't they have representation at the world stage? Right? If you have these minnows like France, relatively speaking, part of the UN Security Council resolution, part of the UN Security Council, then certainly countries as populous as India or Pakistan, frankly, would deserve a seat there. So I think we really have to keep in mind, what is the future going to look like? And if we simply cannot utilize the UN Security Council resolutions because there's a fundamental change on the ground that is taking place, that the aims of these resolutions has been frustrated completely by India and completely at India's fault. What do we do now? Do we simply, fold our hands and say that, oh look, we have become victims, or do we try to come to some resolution which is acceptable? I think personally, and this is my position, I think there are a number of steps that we can take that at least improve the position for the people of Jammu and Kashmir, for the people of Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan within the constitution of Pakistan. And first and foremost, I think, is that to include them within the territory. Now, this can be done through several means. And of course, this has to be something which is in accordance with the wish of the people of Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. It could be through, a resolution passed by the legislative assemblies where we can make them provinces. We can do this provisionally in the sense that we maintain this I don't want to say fiction, but this idea that, at some point there'll be a resolution in accordance with the UN Security Council resolutions. Obviously, that is now very difficult to accomplish. But we can still do that and maintain that, their provinces or their territories of Pakistan subject to any plebiscite that takes place in the future in accordance with the UN Security Council resolutions. Secondly, what we could do is, and something that is far stronger, is that we can ignore what India has done and we can conduct a plebiscite of our own accord within our own territories. And this is something that has been discussed. It is something that would be an insurmountable argument for Indians to then argue that they still have a claim over the territories of GB and Jammu and Kashmir, because they're the ones who first, and it's a great juxtaposition, right? You see India usurping the will of the people of Kashmir and, subsuming that into its own territory by abrogation of Article 370, without even going to the Legislative Assembly of Kashmir, without getting any sort of consent from the people of Kashmir. And on the other hand, Pakistan would be going to the people of Kashmir and asking them, do they want to join Pakistan? And I'm confident, of course, that this would come in an overwhelming majority to join Pakistan. It's what the people of GB have been asking for decades now, and that is something. Now, of course, that to some extent undermines our position when it comes to. It doesn't undermine. I wouldn't say the word undermine. I think it changes our position with regards to the UN Security Council resolutions, and of course, it isn't fatal in any way to that principled position that Pakistan has had, that we should resolve this according to those resolutions. If we do this provisionally, now we can also do it non-provisionally and say permanently bizarre, which frankly speaking seems to be a more realistic approach, because it is now almost impossible to see where to try to implement the UN Security Council resolutions. Once that is done, what other formulas do we have to resolve this issue? We're talking about a resolution in its truest sense. Could we revive some of the previous formulas that we had to enter into some level of peace with India on this? Now, those are things that need to be explored. But I think more than with India, we have to, and the Indians would have to on their side, really explain to our own citizens and our own polity and our own political parties the benefit of this. Unless we have complete political consensus, any move on Kashmir would be extremely dangerous for us, right? And you simply can't have Nawaz Sharif's party opting for this, and then the Pakistan People's Party saying that, oh look, you have done some jhota or some compromise on Kashmir. We cannot have that. We need to have everyone on the same page. All political, all military, all decision makers, power centers within the country approving this. And I think most importantly of all, the people of Kashmir. And again, that is through obtaining their will. Another question that I received on this is, how do we internationalize this dispute? There's several means by which this can be done. And keeping this alive, I think, is our fundamental duty as Pakistanis. One could be through the mechanism of universal jurisdiction. There are states around the world which who allow their courts to take jurisdiction over cases of, say, war crimes, crimes against humanity, things like that. Many of the things that are happening in Kashmir right now, in Indian-occupied Kashmir at the moment, amount to war crimes, crimes against humanity. And these are things that need to be taken by the Kashmiri diaspora. Now, for that to happen, we need to have some sort of fact-finding and some sort of recording of the atrocities that are taking place. Testimony has to be recorded in a legal manner, not simply on media or things like that. Perhaps we should be creating these judicial bodies where Kashmiris from Azad Jammu and Kashmir, retired judges, are part of this commission which records testimony from across the border. Whether it is through Zoom, whether it is through other means. Now, of course, this is immensely dangerous for those people. And so perhaps some other, secret means, but there's certainly many bodies that have done this in the past. But now, because of India's iron fist approach to Kashmir, they have, many of them have been arrested, they've been shut down, and they've been subject to severe repression. Another option is seeking an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice. Of course, taking a decision, going to the ICJ, India has made impossible. It is very difficult for Pakistan to take it for a decision, unless it was referred to it by the UN Security Council. So the only real option is to seek an advisory opinion. An advisory opinion can be referred to the ICJ by any body, any specialized body of the United Nations, such as the WHO or ECOSOC or any of these. And Pakistan simply needs a simple majority. UN General Assembly can do this as well. The Foreign Office, I would assume, has certain reservations on this, and understandably so. But I think we need to get out of that the constrictions that have applied to us in the past. These encumbrances are no more, viable looking at this new normal that we've entered. So one of the concerns was that an advisory opinion would open up the Pandora's box. We're not exactly clear what would happen. It could even go in favor of India. This comes from a position of ignorance. When we don't have an understanding of international law, which sadly has been our national position, we've never had the capacity nor the understanding of international law. This is where we reach, where we say, oh, it could be a surprise. It's not a surprise if you understand what the legal dynamics are, right? So understand that, build your capacity, and then go for this option, right? You cannot point to your lack of capacity and your inadequacies to justify your inability to resolve such a critical issue or reference to the ICJ. And the second is that this would go into India's favor. Currently, the situation that we're in could not be more in India's favor. India committed an illegality, and now the whole world has started accepting that as the reality. Or at least India internally has, and there's very few that are willing to take an opposite perspective on this. So, frankly, we have very little to lose here. And from the legal perspective, from the little bit of international law that I know, we can only go up from this position that we're currently in. And I think most importantly, what would happen is that if we went to the ICJ, the International Court of Justice would declare that India does not have sovereign title, because the only way to transfer sovereign title was through a plebiscite. And if this is declared by an international body, this entire fiction that India has created over the last 75 years would explode. And that, I think, I don't understand why we're not even willing to understand it from that perspective. Perhaps it's a lack of understanding of our legal options. Again, there's much. I want to go into. There's a lot more that can be done to internationalize this. Pushing for fact-finding missions, documenting atrocities, making parallels with the situation in Palestine, and really that's something that I want to go to. The impact of Israeli atrocities on Gaza has certainly had an impact on, or will have an impact on the Kashmiri freedom struggle, both positive and negative, unfortunately. From the positive perspective, we've seen how freedom struggles have resonated globally. There's been an immense outpouring of support from all walks of life in the West, in of course Muslim countries and in Arab countries around the world. And the international community, or at least the international public, has really pushed for an end to these atrocities and has worked there. What we also see is some of the negatives that have come about there. Israel is a major ally of the United States, but also the West in general, and the extent of the atrocities that they have committed has set a precedent, in a sense, where we now understand what is the extent the human rights loving West will go to allow its allies to commit these atrocities. They're not stopping them. They've let it happen for several months now on end with nothing. There is nothing in, say, the International Court of Justice decision that stops Israel from committing more atrocities. In fact, the day the judgment came in, they committed the highest number of atrocities in several months. So this is something that is troubling. The next issue is, if you've noticed, the U.S. State Department spokesman is a person of Indian origin. The Pentagon has spokespersons and employees of Indian origin. The penetration of Indian origin individuals into U.S. institutions is beyond imagination. They're very much there, and whether we like it or not, we can be as politically correct as we want here, but that will have an impact on the policy that they create, right? Just as how we've seen, dual Israeli nationals and American nationals being part of the State Department or the Pentagon or the U.S. White House administration. And that's why their support for Israel is so strong, right? So we see people who are, and this changes policy. Pakistan does not have that leverage. We need to understand this is going to continue in the near future. I think one final thing is that the West has more levers on Israel than they do on India at the moment. They need India more than they need Israel. Yet, Israel is getting away with so much. So imagine what India could potentially get away with in this context as well. Now, of course, India is not Israel in the same sense, but there is still something that we need to be aware of, that India will have this protective cover to quite some extent if atrocities were to increase or if there was something. And that is really within that shell, that cover that India, the Indian Hindutva, BJP Hindutva program is operating. So I'm not going to discuss anything anymore. I think I've taken enough time. But again, thank you to the Institute for inviting me. I hope we can have more discussion on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Despite the air of despair surrounding the Kashmir cause and despite everything that they keep on telling us that we cannot do, thank you so much for highlighting the things that we still can. Now, continuing this discussion, I would request Dr. Asma, Shakir Khawaja for her remarks. Now, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, you are audible. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's always difficult to speak in front of my teacher, Dr. Naeem Salik, but I will try my best. So a few points raised by Dr. Salik, I would like to answer those points. Number one, the literature on Kashmir conflict has been generated, but unfortunately that has not been registered as such on the academic landscape of Pakistan. Think tank is only 1 year old, but we have published on to Kashmir conflict, and those publications and articles and op-eds are available on our website. Then my book, Shaking Hands with Clenched Fists, The Grand Trunk Road to Confidence Building Measure, discusses Kashmir as the core issue which is hampering the Pakistan-India relation, and both countries are unable to resolve it because there is no political will is available. As far as the issue of UN resolution is concerned, definitely pointing out on the reliability of those resolutions. But if government of Pakistan is pursuing the Kashmir cause, Kashmir conflict, Kashmir resolution processes through the prism of those resolutions, then I think as academician, it is our duty to talk about it. And if they would be that not in Pakistan's interest, then India would have been accepted those resolutions during last 76 years and implemented them on Kashmir. So India's denial to implement those resolutions reflects that even in this shape, they serve, they are not that bad to serve our interest. So coming back to the Kashmir conflict, it is really important when we talk about Kashmir conflict, we need to understand the dynamics Kashmir conflict hold. As we all know that Kashmir conflict is a protracted social conflict for last 76 years. And so because of those 76 years, several new dimensions have been added into the identity of Kashmir conflict, and those dimensions are ideological, territorial, historical, strategic, emotional, human, and of course capital politic. But whenever we try to understand, then we have to see that how to address each one of these conflict dynamics. And definitely UN resolutions, they were passed like 75 years back, so they don't have much to say about all these dimensions, and that is why UN resolution can be part of a comprehensive, cohesive conflict resolution framework implemented in Kashmir while addressing all these dynamics which kept on adding in throughout these years. Theoretical framework, several students, they asked me that which theoretical framework applies on Kashmir conflict. So to my limited understanding, it is protracted social conflict, because protracted social conflict is about like conflicts which are lingering on between post-colonial states, and the states are unable to address the core issues And those conflicts started with the principle of divide and rule, as per Edward Hauser. He said that this junction between state and society in many parts of the world links to a colonial legacy which artificially imposed European ideas of territorial statehood onto multitude of communal groups on the principle of divide and rule. And Kashmiris are suffering from this mindset. Here it is important to mention, as Dr. Salik stated, that Punjab and Bengal were divided or partitioned in 1947. That is so true. But this is also an important finding that only Muslim majority states were divided in 1947. And when Indians say that subcontinent was divided, no, it was only Punjab and Bengal which were divided as a result of Radcliffe Award. Protracted social conflict emerges from the denial of basic need. Denial of basic need starts with the failure to redress grievances by the authority, leading to and it cultivates a niche for conflict. Then conflict emerges, and if the governments are not trying to resolve it peacefully, then the violence erupts, and this whole conflict cycle keeps on moving. So and when you see Kashmir, whenever, as a student of South Asian studies, I would say that whenever the peace talks ended in futile between Pakistan and India on Kashmir, the next phase was always a resistance movement by Kashmiris. So here I would like to mention British Prime Minister David Cameron. During his visit to Pakistan in 2011, he stated that as with so many of the world's problems, we are responsible for the Kashmir issue in the first place. So this is very important to understand. And if India denies that Kashmir is not a conflict zone and Kashmir is not a conflict, they should read that what international leaders have stated about Kashmir and why they went to UNO and why they negotiated Kashmir with Pakistan to be settled as through resolution processes. As Brigadier Salik has very intense overview, historical overview of the subject. So I would start the conflict emerged when Britishers sold Jammu and Kashmir on 16th March 1847 through Treaty of Amritsar for 7.5 million Nanak Shahi rupees. Then Radcliffe Awards unjust division of different areas of Punjab that led to the Kashmiri to intensify the dynamics of Kashmir conflict, and that led to the instrument of accession signed on 24th October 1947, and Kashmiris as a nation or community revolted against their king known as Dogra rule. Then here again, I would like to quote Lord Mountbatten, his statement in 1947 when Jinnah refused to appoint him as the Governor General of Pakistan. At that time, Lord Mountbatten stated that this decision of not appointing him the Governor General of Pakistan would cost. He was addressing Jinnah, so he stated, it may cost you the whole of your assets and future of Pakistan. And in October 1947, Indian military entered Kashmir. And despite the fact that Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir signed a standstill agreement with Pakistan and India, which was violated through this move. And as in the Indian government always claim that they entered through after a treaty of accession was signed by Dogra Maharaja and the Indian government. But let me make it clear here that no one have seen a complete text or this document of treaty of accession. Then here it is important to mention that Indian Mahatma Gandhi proposed to negotiate Kashmir issue with Pakistan in 1947 to stop the bloodshed going on in various regions. But Jawaharlal Nehru rejected this proposal to negotiate it peacefully. And this becomes more ironic that India always talk about bilateralism as the key to resolve Kashmir conflict. But its own Prime Minister of that time, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, he refused the suggestion, which was based on bilateral talks. And then when the ball hit the ground and India was unable to sustain their occupation of Kashmir after entering their forces in Jammu and Kashmir, India approached United Nations Security Council on 1st January 1948 after their failure to control Kashmir Liberation Movement. Then United Nations Security Council Resolution 47, what is important for us is that this resolution acknowledges Kashmiris' right to choose and empowered Kashmiri people by granting them right to self-determination. And that was an acceptance at the level of international law that Kashmiris has to decide upon their fate and what they want as a future for them with India. Do they see their future with India or with Pakistan? Pakistan and India both accepted this resolution, and the question as to whether the state of Jammu and Kashmir will accede to India and Pakistan, it was decided that question would be answered through an independent plebiscite. Then, as mentioned by in history, in 1950, the Australian diplomat Sir Owen Dixon, he presented this idea of Dixon Plan. And why this idea of Dixon Plan is still relevant, that all other than UNO's plebiscite, all other formulas presented till to date about resolution of Kashmir conflict, they revolve around the basic idea of the Dixon Plan. This idea was based on partition plus plebiscite idea, and Dixon wrote that only that the Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan is with Pakistan. Ladakh and Jammu are Hindu majority regions, so they want to live with India. So the only question of plebiscite applies on the valley, and there should be a plebiscite in valley so that valley people can decide that which country they want to side with. Pakistan accepted Dixon Plan. It is very important to mention that with the hope that this will resolve Kashmir conflict, Pakistan accepted this Dixon Plan, but India rejected the plan. Then there is a trajectory of conflict resolution efforts based on bilateralism. And why I am talking about bilateralism? Because India on every international forum says that bilateralism should be the key to Kashmir, to the resolution of Kashmir conflict. Very briefly, I would say that for 11 years, the government of Nehru in India negotiated with Pakistan for the resolution of implementation of United Nations resolution on Kashmir. But with the death of Mr. Nehru, all those activities and all what was achieved between the two governments, that came to a standstill, and with the death of Nehru, Indian government retreated from whatever has been achieved. And this was when India betrayed in 1963 by rejecting what has been achieved. Then this started or led to the Operation Gibraltar. Nehru passed away in 1964. So, being the students of international relations and strategic studies, you can connect the dates and dots as well. After India's rejection, there was a pause between any effort of peaceful conflict resolution, and then in Tashkent agreement doesn't talk about Kashmir conflict. So then the next bilateralism was practiced in Shimla agreement of 2nd July 1972. Shimla agreement again considered Kashmir as a conflict between Pakistan and India, and both nations agreed to rename the ceasefire as the line of control and pledged to respect it without prejudice to their respective positions. And Article 6 of Shimla Agreement says that both countries would discuss further modalities and arrangements for the establishment of durable peace and normalization of relations, including a final settlement of Jammu and Kashmir and resumption of diplomatic relations. So those who say that Simla agreement has nothing to do with Kashmir, they should read the original text of Simla agreement in detail. Then the next impact of bilateralism was the Lahore Declaration of 1999. Again, in Lahore Declaration, the then Prime Minister of India, Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, accepted Kashmir as a disputed region, and he wrote that in the supreme national interest of the both sides, and recognized that the resolution of all our outstanding issues, including Jammu and Kashmir, was essential for the purpose of sustainable peace between both countries, and both countries agreed to start a composite dialogue. Then comes Musharraf era. Throughout Musharraf era, the composite dialogue was carried out, and there were several milestones achieved between the two governments, and that include the cross LOC trade, bus service between the two portions of Kashmir, and several other such initiatives. While writing my book, when I asked Khurshid Mahmood Kasuri that what made you to achieve all these things, he said that him and Mr. Mani Shankar Iyer, we decided to view Kashmir lens from the humanitarian perspective instead of the political one. And that is how, when in 2006, President Musharraf made a departure from Pakistan's old stated position on Kashmir and offered a bold 4-stage Kashmir resolution plan. India rejected Musharraf's offer to demilitarize Kashmir, because in order to resolve a conflict, ceasing violence in the conflict is the first ever thing both parties have to achieve. Then after India's refusal to demilitarize Kashmir, a land standstill emerged, but still till to date, I would say, not cross LOC trade, but student visas, scholarships for Kashmiri students were given by Pakistan. Softening up of LOC was there. Intra-Kashmir travel was possible. So the Musharraf formula or Musharraf era is the lives of common Kashmiris who were divided a bit into two regions, and they were denied their right to their own land. Then what was Musharraf's 4 stages Kashmir formula? It was the first stage was the gradual withdrawal of troops. Second stage was there without any changes to existing borders. 3 was self-governance, and 4th was a joint supervision mechanism. And then all these enablers would enable Kashmir for to conduct a plebiscite. Then both states would monitor and conduct a plebiscite in Jammu and Kashmir. Unfortunately, with the departure of Mr. Manmohan Singh, the Prime Minister of India at that time, that was there in India, and we all know the story of now this BJP regime, and they retreated and they violated those agreements and achieved between the two states. So what trends one can identify in the bilateralism between Pakistan and India on Kashmir conflict? India keeps changing on the goalposts. India, whatever has been achieved, India changed the goalpost. Negotiation is a time-gaining strategy for India, and India keeps on running away from peaceful conflict resolution whenever violence is or resistance movement is being seized in Jammu and Kashmir. India failed to failed negotiations lead to armed struggle and trust deficit as the result. So these are the the trends of bilateralism, and the theoretical explanation is that the cost of conflict is bearable for India right now. That is why they don't want to opt for bilateralism. Right movement emerges when both parties consider a conflict as a zero-sum game and realize that violence is not serving their interest anymore. Right now, violence, aggressive posturing, war hysteria serves as a political dividend for BJP. So that is why there is lack of political will on their part to resolve Kashmir conflict with Pakistan, because it is a very important electoral agenda or many part of manifesto of BJP's regime. Currently, India and Pakistan are in a deadlock and a stalemate situation, because since BJP is in power, the dialogue has been discontinued and the peace process has been derailed. And ironically, Modi's Kashmir policy challenges the conscience of developed world, but unfortunately, nothing has been done to date. If you allow me a few minutes, the trends of Modi's Kashmir policies are: one, India acts like a colonial oppressor in Kashmir. They in their stick and carrot approach, their reliance on carrot is more than their reliance on stick. Then the Modi regime sponsored state terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir to set the trend of over-proportioned punishment to refrain Kashmiris from starting their resistance movement. Human rights violation is one of an important tool of state-sponsored terrorism. Divide and rule, of course, they diluted the armed struggle through injecting their own people, and then same applied for the political party. I'm sure you people know that Saida Mufti, this Mehbooba Mufti's father, Saeed Mufti, was a person who allowed or gave space to BJP to enter in Jammu and Kashmir as a political party. And then Modi regime plays on the gaps between the communal parties and considered Kashmir as a communal issue, because it symbolizes Indian colonialism and employs ideological capital, politics, realpolitik, and geopolitics as an agenda to sustain their occupation of Jammu and Kashmir through such manipulation or manipulative activity. And there are several examples of their communal politics, which are very comprehensively covered by my colleague, Mr. Oves Anwar. So I don't want to be repetitive. Oves very rightly pointed out the dynamics of communal politics and how BJP is trying to change or dilute the sense of Kashmir conflict by using propaganda, false images. Very interesting study a few years back I conducted on how Kashmir is being represented on Bharati media during BJP regime. And the results of that research was that Indian media doesn't have any space or allocation of time for those sane voices which talk about peaceful resolution of Kashmir. If you see Indian movies or Bollywood movies, they present Kashmiris as traitors, as agents of Pakistan, and as a bone of contention or impediment in the development process of India. For them, so all these effects, like not providing time to Kashmiri freedom fighters or Kashmiri political leaders or alternate opinion on Indian media other than the BJP's one, and then this representation of Kashmiris in Indian movies, all that contributed to create a false image of Kashmiris as not being victims, but based on this false image is based on victim shaming. So Kashmiris have been shamed in the politics, in media, and in international relations or foreign policy of India, so that they should be so defensive that they shy away from asking their basic right to self-determination from oppressor colonial occupant India. But if for last 76 years Indian policies are unable to silence Kashmiri community, I am sure that would be futile for next 76 years as well, because the only way to resolve Kashmir is peaceful dialogue between Pakistan and India, and of course with the consent of Kashmiri community as well. Thank you so much for providing me time, Sir Salik, and inviting me to share my thoughts on this really very important issue. So I'm looking forward to good question answers, and I'm ready to answer if you have any query related to Kashmir conflict. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for rightly highlighting that Kashmir is a protracted conflict and the approach that India is using to deal with it is not the right one. Now the floor is open for questions and answers, and I would encourage active participation from all of you so that we can make it an even more insightful webinar. Anyone?
I think I'll be just starting this conversation. So thank you very much, Dr. Asma, for very detailed historical.
It's a pleasure to see you, Dr. Nasir. I'm glad to see you.
Thank you, madam. So, and again, it was also a pleasure to hear from our friend the legal aspects, Mr. Oves. So I wish that we would have been here together. So last time we had your company, we could hear it physically. But anyway, I think I was thinking throughout this discussion that does Kashmir define Pakistan or Pakistanis define Kashmir? Because I think ever since we started reading books or we started going to school, so I think we found out that in fact Pakistan is defined by Kashmir because it was always considered a jugular vein. So it was always considered that it is so important for Pakistan because the entire agenda of partition that we think was still, it is pending. So it is the unresolved portion of the 1947 agenda. But if this approach is correct, but I think in the last 76 years, we have not been able to move along this approach. So, in the other one, if Pakistan is not defined by Kashmir, so should Kashmir define Pakistan? Is this the hurdle between for our moving forward in the international system? So this, I think, I would put forward this query to both the speakers, that how should we balance between these two, because these are two different approaches which will determine the future of our policy. The last thing I want to put in, I think, taking a lead from Aware's suggestion of holding plebiscite, I think technology has a new solution for us. If we look at the geography of Azad Kashmir, it is almost bordering very closely geographically to the Indian illegally occupied Kashmir. So if somehow the other we could provide wide-ranging internet facilities through Pakistani broadcasting stations, so that internet facility would extend even if the Indians try to stop the internet activity provided by their own service providers. Our service providers should be able to provide internet facility to entire Kashmir, and then our radio should have an access to Indian Kashmir. And then through these internet connectivities, we can hold virtual plebiscites. Of course, after doing necessary spade work for that, that's virtual plebiscite can be participated by the Kashmiris throughout the diaspora, which is not even in India or even in Pakistan. So throughout the world, they can participate in that virtual plebiscite. So I think your suggestion of employing additional tools, there are spaces, there are, I think, ideas, but the fundamental question will remain the same. Is that our policy is driving Kashmir or Kashmir is driving our policy? So that is how I think if you could throw some light on that, is that practical or not? Oves, or maybe Dr. Asma, you can.
Dr. Asma, if you allow, perhaps I could. Dr. Sab, I didn't get your first question, the balance between two things. Could you please repeat that part?
No, how do I think does Kashmir restricts us because if Kashmir defines Pakistan, so then it means that we, as we say that all roads to peace pass through Kashmir. So does it, is an obstacle in our way that it defines us or we define Kashmir? Because this is not, I'm not saying that we have to opt either of them, but both these approaches have different pros and cons. So over a period of time, I think there has been a lethargy that we have started thinking in other ways. So that is, I think, just a point of understanding.
No, so thank you very much. They're both great questions. So just starting with that first question that you had, does Kashmir define us, or do we define, or do Pakistanis define Kashmir? I think without a doubt, Kashmiris define Kashmiris, Pakistanis define Pakistanis, but Kashmir is part of the definition of Pakistan, and we can never get away from it. I think that is critical to understand. When we do, and you're very right about this discussion, can we, have peace with India without having resolved Kashmir? I think that can only take place even if you don't have a formal recognition of, say, borders or a recognition of whose sovereign title there is over the territory of Kashmir, or acceptance by either. What you can't have is normal relations while atrocities take place. Right. So on the one hand, the atrocities have to end. And I think that is the red line for Pakistan, or needs to be at least the red line for Pakistan. That we will talk to you, we can have peace on a number of other fronts, we can have trade, we can have some normalization of our relations. But the atrocities that are being committed against the Kashmiri people, it does not sit right with us. Right? The ethical, moral concerns there, it's just like Gaza. Right, people are saying we should recognize Gaza. The Saudis are considering it. People have been, voicing this in. But can we genuinely think about recognizing a country that is killing women and children, at an industrial scale? It's simply morally repugnant to what Pakistan stands for as a state. The notion that we are an Islamic state, and we stand with this concept of an ummah, this concept of an Islamic. Pan-Islamic identity. It's simply, at least I find it to be something, whether it restricts us rightly. That is my opinion. Many consider me to be quite a hawk on these issues. I genuinely do want to have peace ultimately with India, but it cannot be at the expense of at least the human rights of Kashmiris. Now, whether, Jammu and Kashmir becomes Pakistan or things like that we'll have to revisit, but I think the minimum is that India stops its atrocities, withdraws many of its troops within their minimum to maintain security, and things along those lines. So I think that is really what it is. But moving to your second question, there's certainly means by which technological means, and even now, I mean, there are levels of internet access that the Kashmiris have. They may be throttled, they may be reduced, but there is you're very right. Like if we were to have a plebiscite whereby, there's online voting or there's verified online voting that we can have, certainly we could have, people of Indian occupied Kashmir participate in that. But of course, the problem with, say, a plebiscite is that not only must it be fair, it must be seen to be fair, right? It must be seen to be the actual will of the people. The concern is that, Pakistan can barely do its own elections in a free and fair manner, to be honest, let alone a plebiscite right now, right? So once we get past this phase and we have some political consensus, there's a normalization in the political situation in Pakistan, then I think we can move on to, discussing having a plebiscite in GB and AJK. But I think this is something that needs to be noted. Everything has an impact on everything else, right? So if you have problems domestically, that is going to affect your Iran strategy, that is going to affect your Kashmir strategy, all of those factors, which I don't think comes into our calculation when we're putting, managing elections domestically. And this needs to be understood. Secondly, technology is very useful, but of course it has its limitations. Secondly, it's costly. Do we right now have the infrastructure or the ability to pay for the infrastructure to be able to beam in internet to the Kashmiri population? We have mechanisms such as Elon Musk's Skynet or whatever it's called, but again, that is not in our control. That is something that I'm sure Elon Musk would want the Indian government's permission before he operates anything like this. If we can't offer something similar, then I think that would be limited to, say, border regions. There's only so much our signals can go to be able to, हमें पाकिस्तान में बड़ी मुश्किलों से इंटरनेट कभी-कभी मिलता है गांव में, तो वहाँ पे इंडिया में phone पे might be difficult. So that's my 2 cents there.
That is
I would also want to briefly answer this question by Dr. Nasir. Can I, Aisha?
Sure, ma'am, sure.
Okay, so first question about who defines whom. So Dr. Nasir, two-nation theory defines Pakistan and two-nation theory defines Kashmir. And this is what is the most important commonality between Pakistanis and Kashmiris. If we see history, all roads from Jammu and Kashmir leads to Rawalpindi. This is another, when I visited once Central Asia, they say that all roads lead to Moscow. So historically, for several hundred years, their whole trade route is coming to Pakistan nowadays. So yes, Pakistan is an important part of Kashmiri identity as well. Then your second question about plebiscite. I personally believe that
Sorry, ma'am. I think there's some disruption at your end.
occupation through any such activity, which it did already by declaring local elections in Kashmir as a plebiscite, because in Kashmiri public participated in an election under Indian rule, so they accepted India as a legitimate occupant of Kashmir. So that is already, that would be a very that can be a very dangerous move. So Pakistan should not conduct any such activity without the consent of UNO or international actors to provide credibility to that action. The third point is about technology. We all know that under Modi regime, India has become master of disinfo. We all know that Modi's whole governance model is established on disinformation, propaganda, and use of technology to make such disinformation credible, and their outreach is massive. So if we provide internet facility, that can be double-edged sword for us as well, because we all know that we are not even good in spreading the truth. And Modi's specialty is establishing the web of lies. So we have to see that are we prepared for the optimum use of technology in our favor and in favor of our interests, and then we can choose those tricky pitch to play our game. Thank you so much.
Yes. I think we should also remember that if you look at Pakistan, the K word in Pakistan stands for Kashmir. So this was supposed to be thought of as an essential ingredient of the identity of Pakistan. So we have to remember that also.
Thank you so much, sir. Do we have any other questions?
Any question? There should be some question. There was a question, but one answer ho gaya tha. We have to have some conversation. Good.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much to the worthy speakers for their input and for enlightening us in several ways about this issue that has been persistent for a very long time, but it kind of gets mundane with every passing year. So thank you once again. I just had a comment about what the Sir Anwar said, that we need to take this issue to the ICJ. Initially, I had my reservations that ICJ can be manipulated, but then we saw what happened with the case of Gaza, and with all the might that Israel had diplomatically from the support they had from the United States and Canada, they were still not able to budge ICJ. So I think we might have a shot taking this issue to the International Court of Justice. So that was just a comment that I might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just want to make a small addition to what he was saying. You know, the problem with us, we are now having a generation Z. Most of them born after, you know, I think in the time frame once they started their consciousness after 9/11. So they have missed the history prior to 9/11. So we need to convince our people also, and also, you know, internationally. So I think there is a huge effort which is required, not to just narrate the story, the historical event which has happened, but how to make Kashmir relevant to our new generation. This is a very challenging aspect because a lot of distractions are already there. So they have to, out of their so busy schedule, you have to find some space to plan and, you know, think about Kashmir. So we have to be, I think, more innovative, especially our generation, to make them realize that, you know, Kashmir is and will continue to remain a very vital issue, a national issue for us.
So I think you know, you've hit the nail on the head. That is absolutely the case. Gen Z is a different species, I would say. You know, and having them care about particular issues, they are the future. You know, this is who inherit the earth from us, who inherit these ideas from us, and you know, traditional notions of, say, patriotism or nationalism or you know, wanting to do something for your country. Those conceptions have changed with this generation. You know, so you're very, very right. We have to foster this love that you know, Pakistanis have for the people of Kashmir, for the territory of Kashmir, and not just the love, the struggle that we are willing to put for it. You know, what older generations have done, the fact that we have sacrificed, you know, peace with India and perhaps a better economic situation, because this is a fundamental principle stand that we have. And I think there's some mechanisms. One is that we need to start really appealing to Gen Z in their language, which is through media, which is through through the language that they speak, really, right? So whether it is through YouTube or you know, different ways of being able to communicate with them. And secondly, I think we need to really understand how Kashmir can make a difference to their lives, right? And why they should pay attention to this. Why it's important for Pakistanis to play a role here. So I think for a number of reasons, this is critical. Just coming back to the previous question on Gaza. You're very right that you know, the ICJ can be politically manipulated. We saw one vote in the Gaza case, Sebutinde from Uganda. Uganda, whether we like it or not, actually has improved relations very much with Israel over the last few years. It had excellent relations. They dipped during the time of Idi Amin, and now, you know, under Museveni, they're much higher. They're extremely good. So I think that vote was entirely, even though despite the denials from the Ugandan Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the vote by Sebutinde, the judge, she voted in favor of Israel more so than the Israeli judge, if you look at the voting pattern. And I think this was entirely politically motivated. But if you look at it otherwise, there were, out of the 17 judges, 16 were voting. I mean, well, take the Israelis. So 15 were voting based on the law, right? So there is no doubt, but these individuals One, once they become judges, are not supposed to be representing their state. And secondly, they have reputations to protect, right? These are professors, these are people of high standing. Sebutinde, she wasn't, frankly speaking, a very well-known academic or anyone of such high standing. So she really couldn't care less about her standing. But all of the others are people who are well respected. And while you can find some space to maneuver and perhaps take it, it's very difficult to come up with decisions that are completely wrong that way. Having said that, the Gaza preliminary measures decision that took place was far short of what was demanded. South Africa had asked for a cessation in hostilities, and in essence, what the ICJ recognized was Israel's right to continue those hostilities. It simply told Israel to be more careful, not to commit genocide, and not to do those things. But genocide, the decision of whether Israel's acts are genocide, will be decided in the case, which will be decided maybe 2 years from now. And it may take 2-3 years before any discussion on whether Israel actually committed genocide or not. Secondly, genocide is extremely difficult to prove. You have to show the intent to destroy a community, that not only do we kill these people, we kill them to destroy that population in whole or in part. That is something which is not easy to establish. Similarly, people have argued that with regards to Kashmir, we should be able to take India to the International Court of Justice based on the Genocide Convention. India has also signed it, we've also signed it. But how do we simply even establish that India has this this intent to destroy in whole or in part? It's becoming somewhat easier with this Hindutva ideology that is being promoted. But again, it is not the easiest thing to promote there. So I'm just going to answer it in that way. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. We have one question from the online participant, but I think the question has already been addressed. The question is that what are the challenges for Pakistan? Okay. What are the challenges for Pakistan if we go into the International Court of Justice?
So I can discuss some of the challenges very briefly, if you'll allow. So there are a number of challenges. First of all, the occupation framework that, say, in Gaza has been well established. There's academic writing on this, there's legal scholarly opinion, and importantly, you already have ICJ decisions on this. The Israeli wall opinion, for example, clearly states that Israel is in occupation of Gaza and the West Bank and Palestinian territories, right? Who we call the OPT, the Occupied Palestinian Territories. The issue of India being in occupation of Jammu and Kashmir has not been established. This is something that only Pakistan, frankly, asserts, right? Indian illegal occupation of Kashmir, and India does the same with regards to Pakistan. Na India ki establish hui, na Pakistan ki establish hui, right? Occupation ko establish karne ke liye, you have 3 requirements. You have, basic iski jo definition hai from the International Committee of the Red Cross is unconsented to effective control over territory you do not have sovereign title to. Okay, so what this means is that a foreign force has come in and taken over the territory. Now, it's very easy to establish this, at least in my opinion, with regards to India. First of all, effective control. India has 700,000 forces there. It has extended its law there. It's implementing that. That is enough for effective control. That has been established. Is it a hostile army? The Indians argue that we were invited there by the Maharaja, right? But of course, you can, undermine we can say it was coercion, really, that allowed for anything like that to take place. So Indians already had, as Dr. Salik had mentioned, the Indians had already arrived by the time the Maharaja had really signed anything or allowed that. So that's one problem that they have, that we have to establish, that, is it a hostile army or not? Even if we can't establish that, the fact that the Indians are there, really the only people who can give them permission are the Kashmiri people. And the only way the Kashmiri people can do that is if a plebiscite takes place and a proper sovereign Kashmiri government is there. Correct? But it is the Indian forces which are the very tool which deny that plebiscite from taking place. So you see how it's a circular argument here. So hostile army ki cheez sirf usi waqt, so in my opinion, it is a hostile army. There is a fundamental conflict of interest. The Indian forces are there which deny this permission, this mechanism to allow for permission to take place. And secondly, lack of sovereign title. Excuse me. the only way India can be transferred sovereign title over Kashmir has been established by the Security Council, and that is through a plebiscite. And since that hasn't taken place, India does not have sovereign title. So these are some of the problems we have. My throat is killing me, so I'm going to stop here. But perhaps we can resolve this later.
Okay, we have one more question.
Assalamualaikum. This is Komal Khan. I'm research officer here. So my question to both the speakers is that to what extent do you see the status quo on Kashmir between both the states has acknowledgement in the policy making circles? And the second question is that how do you foresee what is coming for Kashmir post 2024 elections in India? Because last time we saw that August 5 brought an event that was illegal annexation of the Kashmir. So what do you foresee coming for Kashmir post 2024 Indian elections?
It's a good question, and that is answer would be based on predictions. So first of all, the issue of acknowledgement of status quo in policy-making circles. In Indian policy-making circles, that status quo they interpret as the resolution of Jammu and Kashmir conflict. And because this status quo is in their favor and provide them sustainability of occupation or colonization of Jammu and Kashmir. So they consider it as a resolution and they accept it as the fate of Kashmiri. Sometimes in order to appease their radical vote bank, they talk about occupation or occupying Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit and Baltistan, AJK and Gilgit Baltistan, but that is to gain more popularity in their domestic electoral politics. Your second question, second part of your question was that where Kashmir stands in the forthcoming elections. Kashmir stands in BJP's politics. Kashmir stands at the center stage of forthcoming elections in India because in 2018, while showing or sharing the report card with the Indian public, BJP focused on their anti-Pakistan, anti-Muslim and anti-Kashmir policies and presented them as BJP's achievements during those 4 years. So even today, if you see what BJP has achieved in domestic politics, that is only continuation of their brutality and brutal policies and human rights violation in Kashmir on the legislation against Muslims. And of course, we all know the construction of Ram Temple. So even today, their rhetoric of BJP is not being changed. So we see Kashmir and BJP tried to prove it to Indian public that Congress Kashmir policy was counterproductive, and that policy actually encouraged Kashmiris to stand with Pakistan and work against the Indian sovereignty. And that is why their policy is totally based on threat of over-proportion punishment so that they can sustain their occupation. And that strategy we all know is been hired or learned by Israel and Israel's policy to sustain its occupation of Palestine. So I don't see any change into 2024 BJP's election campaign. Yes, possibility of false flag operation is there because a false flag operation gives that required fascist, nationalist, sentimental support to BJP to make Indian public insecure and then present itself as a maseha of all those insecurities and problems. Thank you.
So much, ma'am. With this, I think we have had a very insightful interactive session, and I would come to conclude the session. So to conclude, I express our sincere gratitude to our distinguished speakers for their valuable insights. This discussion contributes significantly to our understanding of the challenges and opportunities posed towards the options available for Pakistan regarding Kashmir. Thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to have future engagements with you and to foster dialogue and understanding on critical issues of geopolitical nature. Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.